Okay, so you want to own a gas station. You can already see it. A corner lot on a busy road, the kind of place where the traffic never really stops. Your sign out front, glowing red and white against the evening sky, the numbers ticking over as prices change. The soft chime of the door every time somebody walks in for a coffee and a scratch ticket. Cars pulling in, nozzles clicking, money moving. You picture the register never sleeping, beer runs at midnight, contractors at 5 a.m. loading up on energy drinks, the after-school rush for slushies and chips. You imagine standing behind the counter, or better yet, not standing there at all, because you've got a manager for that, and the whole thing just hums. A little cash machine bolted to a piece of American blacktop. Gasoline goes out, dollars come in, and every single person in town has to drive past you to get anywhere. That's the picture. That's what the listings sell you. Turnkey business, high traffic, owner retiring, absentee owner opportunity. Steady demand, a product people literally cannot live without, and a nice fat number on the revenue line. Here's the problem. Almost none of that money is yours. The gas, the thing with your name on the sign, the thing that defines the entire business in your mind, is the part you make the least on. The fuel in those tanks isn't really yours either. A lot of the time you're floating it on credit and praying prices don't move the wrong way overnight. There are steel tanks buried under that pretty lot that can quietly bankrupt you if they so much as weep. Every swipe of a credit card at your pump schemes a cut off the top before you see a dime. And the steady demand everyone talks about is sitting on top of the single most volatile commodity price on Earth. So let me reframe the whole thing for you right now, and we'll spend the rest of this video earning it. A gas station is not really a gasoline business. It is not really a fuel business at all. It's a convenience retail business, a little grocery store, a little restaurant, a little bank, that happens to have gas pumps out front to drag people through the door. Read that again. The pumps are the bait. The store is the hook. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where every cent goes, what it actually costs to buy one of these, the hidden money pits nobody puts on the spreadsheet, why the gasoline is almost a charity operation, where the real profit actually hides, how the whole model can crack in a single bad quarter, and why the smartest, wealthiest people in this business often don't want to pump a single gallon. They want to own the dirt underneath you. Stick with me, because this one flips completely upside down once you see it. Now, before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a gas station actually is. Because gas station is one word covering at least 4 completely different businesses that happen to look alike from the road. Some of them are what the industry calls C-stores, convenience stores that sell fuel. That's the model you're picturing. Pumps out front, a store behind them full of drinks and snacks and cigarettes, maybe a hot food counter. According to the National Association of Convenience Stores, that's NACS, the main industry body, and you're going to hear that name a lot today. There are around 152,000 convenience stores in the United States, and roughly 122,000 of them sell fuel. Together they move about 80% of all the gasoline bought in this country. So when you picture a gas station, statistically, this is it. Some of them are the opposite, big brand fuel-first sites, the 10-pump highway monsters and travel plazas built for volume, where the store is almost an afterthought to the fueling. Some of them are barely stores at all, a booth, a canopy, and pumps. The old-school neighborhood station, maybe with a repair bay, selling gas and cigarettes and not much else. And some of them aren't really operating businesses in the way you think. They're real estate. A piece of commercial land with a fuel lease attached, owned by an investor who never touches a squeegee. Hold that thought, because that fourth kind is the one that quietly wins, and we're coming back to it. For the rest of this, we're going to focus on the one most people actually buy, the single-site convenience store with fuel. The corner C-store. And here's a number that tells you who you're really becoming if you buy one. According to NACS, about 63% of convenience stores in America are single-store operators. This is not a corporate world. This is overwhelmingly a small business, family-owned, one-location world. You would be joining a lot of people betting their entire net worth on one lot. So let's talk about getting in. The biggest number you'll face up front is the price of the thing itself, and it swings enormously depending on one question. Are you buying the business, or are you buying the business and the land underneath it? If you're buying just the business, the operation, the inventory, the right to run it, while the land stays with the landlord you'll pay rent to. You can get in for something like $150,000 to $500,000. That's the gas station for sale you see on the business broker sites, and the low end of that range should make you nervous, not excited. We'll get to why. If you're buying the whole thing, the land, the building, the canopy, the tanks, the pumps, and the going business on top of it, you're in a completely different universe. A turnkey site with real estate typically runs somewhere between $1.5 million and $5 million in most U.S. markets. Get onto a premium corner in a hot market, Texas, Florida, the Carolinas, the Northeast, and you're routinely looking at $4 million to $8 million. And if you get the bright idea to build one from scratch, industry construction estimates put a new build site anywhere from about $4.8 million all the way to $14 million, depending on how big the lot is, how many fueling lanes you want, and how much environmental compliance work the site demands. Here's the lesson buried in those numbers, and it's the first thing that separates the people who make money from the people who get eaten alive. The price of a gas station and the profitability of a gas station are two completely different numbers. A station can gross $6 million a year in sales and hand the owner a take-home that a decent salary job would beat. Revenue is the number on the listing. Profit is the number you actually live on. They are not the same number, they are barely even related, and the entire trap of this business is confusing the first one for the second. So far, so good. You've got a price. Now, here's where the people who didn't do their homework start bleeding, because on top of the purchase price there is a whole layer of infrastructure cost that nobody puts on the brochure. Let me walk you through it in order. First, the tanks. Under that lot are underground storage tanks, USTs, big steel or fiberglass vessels holding tens of thousands of gallons of fuel. They do not last forever. If you have to put new ones in, the EPA has estimated that installing 3 new 10,000-gallon tanks can run from roughly $76,000 to $100,000, and that's before the fancier leak protection setups. This is not optional equipment. This is the business. And it's buried, out of sight, quietly aging, the whole time you own the place. Second, the leak detection and corrosion protection that the law requires on those tanks. A leak detection system for a typical 3-tank station can cost somewhere around $3,000 to $8,000. Retrofitting corrosion protection, they call it cathodic protection, which is just a way of using electrical current to stop steel from rusting underground, can run anywhere from about $10,000 to $48,000. Again, required. Again, invisible. You will spend real money making sure the part of your business nobody can see doesn't slowly poison the ground. Third, and this is the one that ends people, the cleanup if a tank actually leaks. And here's the trap. The cheap station on the cheap lot is very often cheap for a reason, and the reason is sitting underground. According to the EPA, the average cleanup of a leaking underground storage tank runs about $154,000. If that leak reaches the groundwater, the EPA says corrective action typically runs from $100,000 to over $1 million, depending on how far the contamination spread. Let that land for a moment. One set of old tanks, one slow leak you inherited from the previous owner, and you're looking at a bill that can be larger than the entire price you paid for the business. The cheap land is cheap for a reason. Fourth, the equipment above ground, the stuff you can see. The pumps, the canopy, the point-of-sale system, the walk-in coolers, the fuel price sign. Card readers at the pump have to be replaced and upgraded on the industry schedule, not yours, and coolers and canopies and signage all wear out and all cost real money to fix. None of it is glamorous. All of it is mandatory. This is the nobody budgets for this section, and the reason people don't budget for it is that from the road, the station looks finished. It is never finished. It's a machine, and machines bleed. Okay, now that you know what it costs to get in and stay standing, here comes the part that recontextualizes everything. This is the single fact that, once you truly understand it, changes how you see every gas station you will ever drive past for the rest of your life. You barely make any money on gasoline. I don't mean the margins are thin. I mean they're almost nothing, and most of what looks like a margin isn't yours to keep. Let me spell it out slowly, because this is the whole game. According to NACS, the gross margin, the markup, on a gallon of gas has averaged somewhere around 38 to 40 cents a gallon in recent years. In 2023 it was about 39.4 cents, in 2024 about 39.7. Now, 40 cents a gallon might sound okay. Hold on. That's gross margin, the difference between what you paid for the gas and what you sold it for, before any of your costs. Watch what happens next. Out of that markup, according to NACS, roughly 8 to 8.4 cents of every gallon goes straight to credit card swipe fees, the cut the card networks take every time somebody pays at the pump with plastic. And more than 4 out of 5 fuel customers now pay with a card. Another 6 to 8 cents a gallon goes just to getting the fuel trucked from the terminal to your tanks. Then there's the labor, the utilities, the insurance, the maintenance tied to the fuel operation itself. Stack all of that up, and NACS estimates that after expenses the retailer's actual net profit on a gallon of gas is somewhere around 15 cents. Sometimes less. 15 cents a gallon. Now here's the detail that turns this from low margin into something genuinely unnerving. Because the swipe fee is a percentage of the sale, not a flat amount, rising gas prices don't help you, they hurt you. When gas goes from $3 to $5 a gallon, your cost of fuel jumps, the card companies take a bigger cut of a bigger number, and your margin can actually get squeezed at the exact moment the customer is furious at you for gouging them. The industry paid around $21 billion in card swipe fees in 2024 alone, according to NACS, a figure up more than 80% since 2020. For a lot of these single-store owners, the swipe fees they pay exceed their entire pre-tax profit. Read that again. The card networks can make more off your station than you do. So here's the reframe, now with the math behind it. The gasoline is not the business. The gasoline is a giant, expensive, volatile, low-margin magnet whose entire job is to pull a car off the road and put a human being 50 feet from your front door. What happens after that is the business. Which brings us to how the money actually comes in. Not in one stream, in layers. The first layer is the fuel. High volume, tiny margin, brutal volatility, and mostly a customer acquisition tool. Think of every gallon as basically breaking even so you can afford the sign that gets people to pull in. According to NACS data, fuel makes up around 2/3 of a convenience store's total sales dollars, but only somewhere in the high 30% of its gross profit. 2/3 of the money, a bit over 1/3 of the actual margin. That gap is the entire story of this industry in one sentence. The second layer is the store, the packaged goods. This is where it starts to breathe. The drinks, the candy, the chips, the beer, the cigarettes. Now, tobacco is a huge share of in-store sales but a shrinking, low-margin, headache-heavy one, so lean on it carefully. The packaged drinks and snacks, though, that's where you're marking things up 2, 3, 400%. A fountain soda that costs you a quarter sells for $2. That's not a rounding error. That's the business. The third layer, and increasingly the crown jewel, is food service. Prepared food, coffee, roller grill hot dogs, pizza, breakfast sandwiches, the whole deli operation. According to NACS, food service has become the single most important in-store category, driving a wildly disproportionate share of profit relative to how much floor space it takes. Prepared food alone runs the highest margins in the store. This is why the big successful chains you can picture are basically fast food restaurants that sell gas in the parking lot. They've figured out the secret. The kitchen out-earns the pumps. And the fourth layer is the little stuff that's almost pure margin. The lottery, the ATM fees, the car wash if you've got one, the money orders, the vape, the phone accessories. Small tickets, tiny costs, and they drop cleanly to the bottom line. Now here's how brutal the arithmetic really is. NACS has pointed out that if you strip the fuel profit out entirely, only the very best-run stores, roughly the top third of the industry, actually turn a profit on the inside of the store alone. The rest, on paper, would run their in-store operation at a loss without the traffic the fuel drags in. So the pumps need the store to survive, and the store needs the pumps to get anyone through the door. They're handcuffed together. Neither one works alone. That's the machine. So let's talk about what it costs to run that machine every single day, because the sales roll in, but the bleed never stops. There's labor, and it's usually your single biggest operating cost. You're open long hours, often 16 or 24, 7 days a week, which means multiple shifts of clerks in a low-wage, high turnover job where somebody always calls out sick. There's the electricity, and it's enormous. Those big glass door coolers and freezers and the illuminated canopy run all night and never turn off. There's the insurance, which for a fuel site with buried tanks and cash on hand and cars whipping in and out is not cheap. There's the property tax on a valuable commercial corner. There are the repairs. A compressor dies in a cooler and $1,000 of inventory is warm by morning. There's shrink, which is the polite industry word for theft, both the drive-offs at the pump and the shoplifting inside. And there's the swipe fee again, showing up on the inside sales too, not just the fuel. For the whole industry, it's the second biggest operating cost after labor, ahead of rent, ahead of utilities. Add it all up and you understand why this is a penny's business run at enormous scale. The average store, according to NACS, does something like 1,400 to 1,500 transactions a day. You are not getting rich on any one of them. You're getting rich, if you get rich at all, on the sheer relentless volume of tiny margins, every day, forever, with no day off. Now, here's where it gets genuinely dangerous, because everything I've described so far is balanced on top of a price you do not control at all. The volatility is the structural threat that can break the whole model, and here's the mechanic of it. You buy your fuel wholesale, days before you sell it retail. That gas sits in your tanks. If the wholesale price spikes overnight, a refinery goes down, a hurricane hits the Gulf, a conflict erupts in an oil-producing region, your next delivery costs dramatically more, but your competitor across the street might still be selling off cheaper inventory, so you can't fully raise your price without losing the traffic that feeds your store. Your margin gets crushed from both ends, and it runs the other way too. When wholesale prices are falling fast, that's actually when street margins tend to widen and you can breathe. Your profitability on any given week can depend less on how well you run your store and more on which direction the global oil market happened to move. You're a small business owner strapped to a commodity futures curve, whether you signed up for that or not. And this is exactly the kind of pressure that has broken real companies. Which brings me to the case study, a real one, names and dates and dollars, because I want you to see how this ends when the structure gives way. Let's talk about Getty. For a big chunk of the 20th century, Getty was one of the most recognizable fuel brands in the Northeast, that clean orange and white logo on hundreds of stations across New York, New Jersey, and the Mid-Atlantic. And there were really two Gettys, which is the whole point of this story, so keep them separate in your head. There was the operating company, the one that actually ran the fuel marketing business, bought the gas, ran the stations. And there was the property company, the one that owned the dirt. In 2000, the Russian oil giant Lukoil announced it would buy the operating company, Getty Petroleum Marketing, in the first-ever acquisition of a publicly held U.S. company by a Russian corporation, paying $5 a share for a network of around 1,300 gas stations across 13 states. That was the rise. A global oil major plants its flag in the American Northeast, hundreds of stations strong. Now the decline. The operating company didn't own most of those locations, at least around 800 of them from a separate, publicly traded real estate company called Getty Realty, REIT, a real estate investment trust, which is just a company that owns property and collects rent. The rent on that master lease ran to roughly $4.9 million a month. In 2011, Lukoil offloaded the operating company to an investment firm. And then the structure started to crack. A bitter fight broke out over who was responsible for the environmental cleanup at those aging sites. Remember the buried tanks. Remember the $154,000 average cleanups. The operator tried to withhold rent to force the landlord's hand. The landlord terminated the lease. And in December 2011, Getty Petroleum Marketing filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now here's the lesson, and it's the sharpest one in this whole video. When the smoke cleared, one of those two companies was gone and one of them was fine. The operating company, the one that pumped the gas, ran the stores, carried the brand, wore all the environmental risk, that one collapsed. The real estate company, Getty Realty, the one that just owned the land and collected the rent, it took the properties back, released them to other operators, and is still around today as one of the largest publicly traded REITs specializing in convenience store and gas station real estate in America. The operator went bankrupt. The landlord kept the land. Let that land for a moment, because it tells you exactly who was really in the strong position the entire time, and it wasn't the one with its name on the sign. And this points us straight at the deeper game. Because once you understand the Getty story, you start to see how the sophisticated money actually plays this business, and it's almost the opposite of the dream we started with. The savvy operators, the ones who build real wealth here, tend to win on three things that have almost nothing to do with the thrill of pumping gas. The first is the store, taken seriously, really leaning into the high-margin food service and the packaged goods until the station is functionally a small restaurant with a fuel traffic engine attached. The fuel just buys the footsteps. The kitchen and the cooler bank the money. The second is scale and secondary streams. Car washes, which throw off famously high margins for the space they take. Owning your own fuel distribution so you capture that trucking margin instead of paying it. Running enough sites that you have real buying power. This is a game where one store is survival and 20 stores is a business. And the third, the big one, the Getty lesson, is the real estate. The people who quietly do best in this industry very often think of themselves less as gas station operators and more as owners of well-located commercial corners that happen to generate rent and cash flow right now, and that appreciate over decades, and that can one day be sold or redeveloped into something far more valuable than a gas station. They get the tax advantages that come with owning depreciating real property. They get the appreciation of an irreplaceable corner lot. They get diversification across sites. And notice what the oil majors themselves decided, in 2014, has sold off its entire retail network, around 1,360 stations, to Marathon Petroleum Speedway for about $2.8 billion. A company that literally pulls oil out of the ground looked at owning the gas stations that sell it and said, "No thanks, that's not the business we want to be in." When the people who make the fuel don't want to run the stations, that should tell you something about where the easy money in fuel retail actually isn't. So let's bring it all the way home with 2 years, side by side, framed as a realistic scenario for a single well-located store doing around 1.5 million gallons a year with a busy inside operation, the kind of numbers NACS uses when it describes a typical site. The good year. Oil prices are stable and drifting gently downward, which is the sweet spot. Falling wholesale costs mean your street margin on fuel actually widens toward that 40-cent gross, and after all the swipe fees and freight and labor you're netting your solid $1.50 a gallon or a little better. On 1.5 million gallons, that's real money, but it's not the story. The story is inside. The coffee's flowing, the kitchen's humming, the cold drinks and the snacks and the lottery are all turning at fat margins. Food service is carrying the profit line the way NACS says it does at the best stores, and you're comfortably in the profitable top tier of the industry. The tanks behave. Nothing leaks. The card readers don't need replacing this year. You take a genuine owner's income home, and you look like a genius. The bad year. A supply shock sends wholesale fuel prices spiking. Your margin on every gallon gets crushed because you can't raise the street price fast enough without watching cars drive to the competitor across the street, and the higher prices mean the card networks are skimming a bigger cut off every fill-up, exactly when you can least afford it. Angry customers assume you're the one gouging them. Then a compliance inspection flags one of your aging tanks, and a slow leak turns into a six-figure remediation bill. Call it that $154,000 average, and pray it never touched the groundwater, because if it did you're staring at a number with a comma in a very bad place. Your best clerk quits, and you're covering the overnight shift yourself at 3 a.m. The dime a gallon you thought you'd make evaporates, the store profit gets swallowed by the cleanup, and the steady cash machine is now the thing keeping you awake at night. Same lot. Same pumps. Same sign. Completely different year, and you controlled almost none of the difference. So go back to that opening picture. The glowing sign, the numbers ticking over, the door chiming, the little cash machine bolted to a piece of American blacktop. It's real. Those stations really are out there humming, and people really do build lives and fortunes on them. But not in the way the dream tells you. Because the gasoline isn't really the business. The 40 cents you almost never get to keep, the volatile commodity strapped to your back, the low-margin magnet in the ground, that's just the cost of getting a human being to pull off the road. The coffee is the business. The kitchen is the business. The lottery and the cold drinks and the relentless daily volume of tiny margins are the business. And underneath all of it, quiet and patient and outlasting every operator who ever went bankrupt trying to sell fuel on it, the land is the business. The sign out front isn't really the business. The dirt underneath it is.